I'll come back to Margaret Cooper. Peter Craig?
Yeah.
Isabel Dorman?
Here.
Joe Fagan?
Here.
Grant Ferguson?
Here.
You're here. Graham Horn?
Here.
Thank you. Martin Hose?
Here.
Anne LeBlanc?
Here.
Monique McAdams?
Here.
Ian McCallan?
Here.
Catherine McClymont?
Here.
Kenny McCreary?
Here.
Hugh MacDonald?
Here.
Mark McGeever?
I'm here.
Thank you. Davy McLachlan?
Here.
Lynn Naylan?
Here.
I have apologies from Richard Nelson, but Eric Halford, I believe you're substituting.
I am, yes.
Thanks, Councillor Halford. John Ross? John Ross? I thought I see
Apologies for John Ross.
Apologies, okay. Graham Scott?
Yeah.
Margaret Walker?
Here.
David Watson?
Here.
Thank you. Josh Wilson?
I'm here.
That's great. Officers present, we also have Michael McGlynn, Shirley Cleland, Colin Park, Pauline Elliott, Lorraine O'Hagan, Elaine Maxwell, Louise Harvey, Margaret Mary Cairns. We have Andrew Thompson, Ian Ross, and myself and Nicola Docherty from Administration Services, and a member of the press has been invited. So I'll now pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth Ann. On to number one, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. On to agenda item number 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting on pages 5 to 12. Any comments or questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? No. Can we accept those as accurate record of the minute? Okay, thank you. Going to the monitoring items. Agenda item number 3, the revenue budget monitoring 2020-21, which is pages 13 to 22. And ask Louise to take us through this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the first of 2 reports on the revenue budget for committee today. One covering the final outturn position for the resource for 2021, and the second covering the current financial year 21-22 position as at the 21st of May 2021. So this first report provides information on the actual expenditure against the budget for the period 1st of April 2020 through to the 31st of March 2021 for community and enterprise resources. It's the final report presented to committee for the financial year and outlines the final outturn position in relation to the budget and the probable outturn, and also outlines the final cost of COVID for the resource. Paragraph 5 outlines the final year-end position as at the 31st of March with an overspend of 1.638 million before approved transfers to reserves and 7.061 million overspend after approved transfers to reserves. Removing the cost of COVID, this leaves an underspend of 24,000 on the resources core budget in line with the probable outturn position. The cost of COVID for the resource for the year is 7.085 million, and this includes additional costs of 3.843 million in relation to staffing costs, cleaning materials, PPE, equipment, transport and increased costs of waste disposal, as well as the payment to South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture for loss of income. The resource, as you know, was also impacted as a result of loss of income, and it was 5.328 million, and this covered parking income, school meals, road construction unit income and private care of gardens, as we also had savings not achieved of 100,000, but this was offset by an underspend in our core budgets of 2.186 million, mostly in the main relating to the food cost of school meals. The core budget position for the resource is an underspend of 24,000, and this reflects an underspend in employee costs within facility, streets, waste and grounds, and an over-recovery of income within planning and economic development, offsetting an overspend in the fleet services in respect of the timing of efficiencies and reduced income and the cost of waste contracts. And variance explanations for each of the individual services are detailed in Appendix B to F. The position reported in the paper includes proposed transfers to reserves, and I can report that these have been approved at the Executive Committee on the 23rd of June as part of the Council's 2021 financial position. Budget variants are set out in the paper as well, and these reflect movements in our community and enterprise budget from the 26th of February, and these mostly cover year-end accounting transactions relating to transfers to and from reserves for capital and budget variants, budget uploads to reflect how our services are delivered, and to establish budget to reflect income that we've received, mostly in relation to COVID support. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that an overspend of after approved transfers to reserves of 7.061 million be noted, and that this is all COVID related, and that proposed budget variants are detailed in Appendix B to G be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Any questions on agenda item number 3?
No hands raised, Chair.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, I just said there is no hands raised, Chair.
Right, okay. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
You agree with the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
On to agenda item number 4, which is the revenue budget monitoring 2021-22, pages 23 to 32. And Louise is going to take us through this report again.
Yeah, so this is the second report for committee today on the revenue budget, and it's the most current information on the new year revenue budget, covering the 1st of April through to the 21st of May, which is period 2 of our financial year. So again, it's the first report to committee for the 21-22 financial year, and it outlines the specific costs incurred in relation to the resources COVID response, as well as our core budget. So it's an early report for the resource for both of those areas. Paragraph 5 in the normal way outlines the financial implications, with a reported overspend of 613,000. The current cost of COVID for the resource is an overspend of 587,000, and this reflects increased expenditure of 230,000 relating to increased staff costs in support of the resources COVID response, costs resulting from, again, increased domestic waste tonnage, additional transport and the costs of PPE and additional cleaning regimes. In addition, there's 363 million represents loss of income, and we're offsetting 6,000 against these costs for budget that's been unspent as a result of COVID. This position does not reflect the impact for South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture as at the 21st of May 2021. The core budget for the resource has a minor overspend as at the 21st of May, and the variance explanations for each of the service areas are detailed in Appendix B through to F. We have the normal budget variants, and these reflect movements in the resources budget from the 1st of April to the 21st of May, and cover the areas including transfers of funding and budget to South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture for utilities and RPI, budget realignment to reflect how we deliver our services, transfer of our budget from revenue to capital, and the creation of budget, again, to reflect external income and service delivery charges. So if I can refer committee back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that an overspend of 613,000 as at the 21st of May, as detailed in Appendix A of the report, be approved, and that this in the main relates to the cost of COVID, and again that the proposed budget variants as detailed in Appendix B to G be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Louise. Any questions? Nope. No hands up. Okay. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
You agree with the report?
Agreed.
Great. Okay, going to agenda item number 5, which is the capital budget monitoring 2020-2021, which is on pages 33 to 36. And it is Lorraine to take us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, evening, everyone. Agenda item 5 is on page 33 and is the first of the 2 capital budget monitoring reports for the resource. So item 5 is the final capital budget monitoring report for the year 2021, and the purpose of the report is to advise committee of the full spend for the year to the end of March. Section 3 gives the background and explains the budget position for the year. The main point to note is the budget for the resource hasn't changed since we last reported to committee back in May. Section 5 details the financial implications. Section 5.1 notes the total programme for the year of 37.622 million, while Section 5.2 details the final spend for the year of 30.196. This is a difference of 7.4 million on the approved programme, and Section 5.3 goes on to explain that that final outturn is lower than what we had previously advised to committee back in May. Section 5.3 and 5.4 explain the position as we understood it back in May. And Section 5.5 goes on to detail the projects responsible for the additional underspend at the end of the year. Section 5.6 notes the ongoing implications of COVID on the capital programme across the council, and that any funding which we didn't utilise in 2021 can carry forward. And I'll give you an update on the New Year programme in a separate report to committee. Sections 5.7 and 5.8 provide details of some of the accounting adjustments required, as I think Louise mentioned previously. So we've got some spend that is more correctly sitting in the revenue account rather than capital, and vice versa. This is an operational, no operational impact for projects. It's an accounting adjustment only. So for the resource, £927,000 of capital spend is required to be recorded as revenue, and conversely, a minor amount of £4,000 of revenue spend should be recorded as capital. And the above transfers mean that for the purposes of publishing our annual accounts only, the resource has capital spend of £29.273 million. I've got no other points to note for committee, so if I can ask committee to go back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report and ask that the Community and Enterprise Resources budget of £37.622 million and final spend for the year of £30.196 million be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. I see Joe Fagan's got his hand up. Joe?
Thanks, Chair. It was just on that point about the accounting adjustment, 5.7 and 5.8 in the report. And I appreciate this happens every year and it's just part of our usual accounting practices. I'm just wondering, to help me understand that, if you're able to expand or elaborate just a little bit more on what that relates to, and because specifically it brings up this issue of ownership. So I'm just keen to understand what the issues are that sit behind that in this particular case.
Lorraine, you able to give an explanation on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we have some capital projects where we incur spend on buildings that don't necessarily belong to the council. So, for example, some of the vacant and derelict land spend that we incur, Shawfield Industrial Estate, for example, 500,000 there. We transfer that to revenue because that's not council assets, but the funding that we receive to pay for that is capital funding from the government, but the flexibilities within the capital grant allow us to actually make payments to other organisations. For example, in the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, it's similar. So we can incur the spend through our capital programme as we normally would, but there is an acknowledgement that depending on the type of spend that we incur, as I say, if it's for another organisation or if it's for someone else's property or building or asset, then we can make that transfer and account for it accordingly. And this is what we've done over the last umpteen years. It's been through the audit process, so there's no issue with it at all. It's just to make the accounting more correct. But from a monitoring perspective, we tend to leave the budget where it's been all year so that we can get to that end point in the year so that you've got complete visibility on your capital programme as it was set at the start of the year. But at the end of the year, we just make this transfer. Does that help?
Thank you very much for that, Lorraine. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
You agree with the report?
Agreed.
Great. Okay, go on to agenda item number 6, which is Capital Budget Monitoring 2021-22, pages 37 to 40. Lorraine's going to take us through this item again.
Thanks, Chair. So as you said, on page 37, we have the New Year programme, and this is reflecting the budget and spend to the 21st of May, so that's our accounting period 2. Section 3 of the report gives the background and explains how the budget is based on the overall capital programme for the new year, which was presented to the Executive Committee last Wednesday. Section 5 details the financial implications, And section 5.1 notes the resources total capital programme for the year is 46.735 million. So that budget is based on the original programme of projects that we had approved by Executive Committee back in November 2020. And we've updated it to take account of a number of things, including the year-end position at the end of financial year 2021 that we just talked about. It also includes adjustments approved by Executive Committee beyond November 2020. We've also got additional funded projects coming into the programme, and we've also carried out an exercise to identify what we think will be the anticipated level of spend for the year, so to develop a programme that is achievable and realistic for the coming year. In addition, as we mentioned a minute ago, has been the case in previous years, again to comply with accounting rules, if we know that there's spend that's sitting in the wrong place, then again we'll move it to the correct programme so that we're starting off with the right budget that we want to monitor. So project expenditure totaling 819,000 should be reported through the revenue budget, as it can't be classed as capital. This adjustment's for Clyde Gateway, that's detailed in section 5.2. Conversely, we've got roads carriageways revenue budget totalling £1.5 million, and in order to manage that in totality for the road programme, again we'll transfer that to the 21-22 capital programme, and that's detailed in section 5.3, and all of those adjustments are included in the budget that we've set of 46.735 for the resource. Finally, section 5.4 notes that £2.289 million has already been spent by the resource to the 21st of May. I've got nothing else to highlight in the report, so if I can refer committee back to section 2 in terms of recommendations and ask that the resource budget of 46.735 and spend to the 21st of May of 2289 be noted. Thank you.
Any questions? No. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, go on to agenda item number 7, the workforce monitoring, March and April 2021, pages 41 to 48. Elaine Maxwell is going to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. You'll know this is a standard workforce monitoring report, which is prepared by personnel and provides committee with an update on the employment information, as you said, for the period of March to April this year. 4.1 shows the resource absence figure for April was 5.2%, and that's representing a decrease of 1% when compared to last month. Looking at April 2020, the figure has increased by 0.2%, and you'll see that it's noted that the April 2021 figure is 0.9% higher than the council-wide average, the council-wide figure. Based on these figures at April and the annual trends, the projected annual average absence for the resource for 2021-22 is 5.2%, again compared to the council-wide average of 4.3%. You will know, obviously, based on information we've been providing regularly at committee, that these figures also contain the information that absences as a result of COVID-19. And you'll see that it's reported at the time of the report being produced, the council's absence level were sitting at 4.9%, with 0.4 relating to COVID absence and special leave. An update based on last week's figures show that the council's absence levels percentage sits at the same level, 4.9%, with 0.7 relating to COVID absence and special leave. Moving on to 4.2, that's showing the occupational health information, which is found in Appendix 2, shows that 211 occupational health referrals were made during the period, which is an increase of 74 when compared to the same time last year. Obviously, it's important to note that the period last year obviously was when we reached and entered into lockdown, so I would expect to see a decrease in these figures. Again, at 4.3, there were 43 accidents and incidents recorded within the resource for this period, which again is an increase of 28 when compared to last year. And for the same reason, I would expect to see an increase because last year, in comparison, we were in lockdown. Moving on to the employee relations activity at 4.4, there were 2 disciplinary hearings recorded with no grievance or dignity at works during this period. 4.5 shows the analysis of leavers, and as detailed in Appendix 2, there were 22 leavers during this period eligible for an exit interview, and there were 9 exit interviews conducted. 4.7 goes on to show that 48 employees left employment in total, and managers have indicated that 46 of those posts are being replaced. 1 post was removed for saving, and 1 post was due to end due to the end of a fixed term contract. I would refer members back to section 2 of the report and ask committee to approve the recommendation to note the employment information from March to April 2021. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Elaine. Any questions? No, I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
We agree the report.
Agreed.
Okay, we'll go on to the items for decision. Agenda item number 8, Supplier Development Programme, and that is on pages 49 to 56. And Pauline Elliott, you're going to take us through this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members, as you know, the Supplier Development Programme is a business support programme aimed at helping small and medium businesses to tender for and win public sector contracts via a range of support, including events and training. The programme is funded by subscriptions from all 32 Scottish local authorities and other member organisations, and it's also supported by Scottish Government. A list of the Supplier Development Programme members is listed in Appendix 1 to your report. Members, South Lanarkshire Council has hosted the Supplier Development Programme since 2014, and that means that we act as employers of the staff. However, it is also administered by a board of local authority elected members from 13 of the member authorities and a Scottish Government officer. And a list of board members is attached as Appendix 2 to your report. Members, in section 4 of your report on page 20, it explains that for this 21-22 financial year, Scottish Government has awarded a grant of £150,000 to the Supplier Development Programme to develop their programme and meet a range of objectives which are listed in section 4.2 of your report. In order to deliver on the objectives and outcomes for this money, there is a requirement to employ 2 one-year officers, a marketing and events assistant whose remit will be to deliver events and promotions, and also a business development officer whose remit will be to attract new membership and income to the Supplier Development Programme. Chairman, in section 6 of your report, you'll notice that there are no financial implications for the Council because this is entirely externally funded. Therefore, we're asking members to approve the recommendations in section 2 of the report to recruit 2 officers on fixed-term one-year contracts as detailed in section 5. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pauline. Any questions? No. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
I agree the report.
Agreed.
Okay, go on to agenda item number 9, Place-Based Investment Programme, pages 57 to 72. And Pauline's going to take us through this report. Pauline?
Thanks, Chair. Members, in February, Scottish Government announced its budget and its intention to implement a 5-year place-based investment programme. South Lanarkshire Council received notice in May of this year that its allocation of this funding for the 2021 financial year was just in excess of £2 million. Members, this funding is similar to the town centre capital grant funding that you've been dealing with for a number of months now. However, it does differ from the town centre capital grant funding in 2 important ways. Firstly, it's a 5-year programme, as opposed to being awarded year on year. And secondly, it's not ring-fenced to the 22 South Lanarkshire town centres under the Scottish Government's definition. It can be allocated more widely. However, for the first year of the 5-year programme, we have to commit the money by March. So it's very important, Chairman, that we agree the criteria for the first year for the current 21-22 financial year. Chairman, members have a proposal to increase the remit for the current financial year to meet the terms of the new grant from the 22 towns covered by the town centre capital grant funding to 39 towns and neighbourhood centres using the local development plan definitions of town and neighbourhood centres and strategic centres. And they're actually listed in Appendix 1 to your report. This is because for year 1 the clock's already ticking and any projects approved for year 1 must be deliverable in the 9 months left, assuming members agree the recommendations. Remember, just to make members aware that criteria for years 2 to 5 can be altered because we have a longer time frame to decide on those and a longer time frame. And it is intended to implement a bidding process for those grants moving forward, as explained in your report. The selection process for year 1 is outlined in section 5.3 of your report because of the very tight time frame to approve the funding. And that tells you that the criteria that officers have used to make the recommendations for this year funding include projects that have come forward before for funding but weren't ready at the time but are ready now to move forward. Projects that officers and members are aware of from your towns and communities and that at the present time are sufficiently advanced to meet the first year's time frame. And then the third category is projects that have previously received funding but which now need additional funding to complete them in the original time frame. Table 1 on page 62 of your report outlines the new projects to be funded under the first year of the place-based investment programme, and you'll notice that towns and neighbourhood areas coming forward for recommendation, including Halfway, Blantyre and Bothwell, none of which have received funding in previous rounds. You'll also notice, members, that there is a proposal to allocate a sum of the money for capacity building to enable groups and communities to get ready for future rounds and be ready to come forward to access the money moving forward. If members agree the recommendations, there will be regular updates on the programme to committee moving forward. Subsequently, members, we're asking you to approve the recommendations in section 2 of your report for the first year and that we bring forward regular updates on the future years moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pauline. I see Joe Fagan's his hand up and David Watson. Joe first. Joe?
Thanks, Chair. Could I ask, I've got several questions, so I'll keep them brief. Could I ask in the first instance for an update on the Escobride master plan and whether Escobride will be included in the Near at Home working project?
Pauline?
Yes, I mean that project, which is a Transport Scotland project, is ongoing and should be deliverable within the time frame, Chairman. Escobride isn't included in the first year of the place-based investment programme, but it does have £685,000 of funding confirmed through 2 lots of Scottish Government Town Centre Capital Grant funding and also the Transport Scotland programme, which is for the near home working of £250,000. And obviously it will be eligible to come forward for other bids. There's also a bid to the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund for a further phase of the Escobride Town Centre project. That's not included in this report because it's specifically for the place-based investment funding. The other thing about Escobride, of course, it does have new private sector owners. It's owned by the Deutsche Pfandbriefbank, which is a German investment bank, which has appointed LaSalle as its managing agent. And we can't give too much detail to members because of commercial confidentiality, but obviously the new owners are keen to make their asset work for them. So the hopeful thing for Escobride moving forward is that there is likely to be private sector funding to match fund with any public sector money moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just briefly, my second point, it comes out of that, obviously Escobride wasn't successful in its bid for an application under the Community Renewal Fund, but there are, and they're mentioned in the report, there is a series of town centre projects that the council is taking forward. Can I ask what engagement there has been with the town centres confirmed, and can I also ask when we can expect to see a paper on the Community Renewal Fund advising us of the outcome of the process?
Pauline?
There is a members awareness session on the Community Renewal Fund for this year. I mean, the Community Renewal Fund and the Levelling Up, that's the UK funds again. It was a very tight time frame for the first financial year. So there is a members awareness session being organised. I think that's been held on the 10th of September. And then obviously there'll be more time to report to members like this fund for future financial years, but it's very, very tight for this current year.
Okay.
Okay, my question was about engagement with the town centres before, as part of the project that was being put forward, and also when we would expect to see a paper actually come to committee. Members' awareness sessions are very welcome, but if we're making a decision or if we're delegating to someone to make a decision about substantial sums of money, ultimately we have to be able to see how those decisions were taken, and that should be reported to the committee. I'll come to what I'm really getting at in asking these questions, because there have been lots of applications for funding, and I think I've had quite a patient, I've been quite patient about it, because I think people know my anxieties about Escobride Town Centre. But basically my concern is that we're at a point now 4 years into the council where we still don't have a consultation on the future of the town centre. We still don't have the master plan. We still don't have a position in the future of the civic centre. We still don't have established Escobride as a centre of excellence for hydrogen. We still haven't got a future worked out for our strategic sites, despite the fact that we're building city deal roads into them. We still haven't incorporated hydrogen into our fleet. And I'm just wondering if anyone can tell me, have we actually successfully delivered over the past 2 or 3 years a single town centre project through to completion at Escobride Town Centre?
I mean, I don't know if the director wants to come in. I think the scope of your questions go beyond this particular committee item, Councillor Fagan. So obviously the detail on all the funding, there's been a town centre funding report on practically every community and enterprise committee, I think, for the last 18 months, bar one. And the appendix 2 to this report is a composite table with all the funding given to all the town centres that have received funding. And Escobride is in receipt of a number of funding streams. Obviously, what has happened with the current town centre owners going into receivership, I think, and the town centre now being owned by a bank, is out with the council's control, albeit the council is still looking to drive forward that project. And there are indeed other things happening in Escobride, but they are out with the scope of this particular committee paper, I think.
Okay, Joe, can I ask you just to email that into the director? Does Michael want to come in there?
Yeah, it's just to maybe respond to a couple of Councillor Fagan's points, and maybe just to elaborate on what Paul has already said. Just to go back a step or two on the Community Renewal Fund, I think just to be clear, the timescales for that, again, were incredibly tight, and officers worked with a lot of stakeholders to develop applications. As some members will know, the funding allocation for South Lanarkshire was approximately 3 million, and I think we had 11 million pounds worth of applications in, which is good, but through that, choices has to be made. One of the applications that we're putting forward, which Councillor Fagan's referring to, is this study on town centres. At this point in time, there hasn't been engagement with the town centres because we don't know if we're going to be successful in that application, because it's decided by the UK government. This is our preferred projects, but it will still be the UK government. And we're hoping by the time we have the members' awareness session the 10th of September, we'll have some outcomes, and hopefully a positive outcome. And from that, map out how we will engage with all the town centres. And then that should hopefully then inform future bids, and also towards the Levelling Up Fund also. I think going back to some of the issues that Councillor Fagan's referring to, and we've discussed this before, is some of this is not within the control of the council. Changes in ownership within the town centre is a fundamental change. We're continuing to engage with LaSalle. We're continuing to progress the master plan because we show that the ambition of the council. Issues such as hydrogen, etc., these are all ambitious and quite rightly to go down those lines, but we are not in a position as a council to start to develop being a hydrogen provider or have hydrogen vehicles. We're very much at the early stages of looking at transitioning our smaller vehicles to electric. And just the last point, in terms of successfully delivering projects, prior to COVID, and I know it's a few years ago, the council put a lot of money towards Ice Rink, which was a catalyst to the food area around it, the Ice Rink, and gave the owners at that time confidence to do that. So that's successfully delivered, but you can only do that in partnership with the private sector. And again, the council only has a kind of contribution. So I do get the point Councillor Fagan's making, but as I've always said at these committees, the council has a role. It's not a single deliverer of all projects. So sorry for a very long-winded answer, but hopefully that'll cover some of the points. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. David, you've dropped off my list here. Are you still here with your hand up? David Watson?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened to my hand then, but yeah. I'll try and not reiterate some of the points Joe's made, because some of them I was going to make Joe mention, but I think there's a recurring theme coming through here, and I'm not necessarily just pointing a finger at the council here, because I think obviously we keep getting told there's tight timescales for these, but my question at this stage is, what action has been taken to communicate with the Scottish Government and the UK Government that, you know, these timescales are impractical for democratic accountability? Because what we're finding is that it's officers that are taking these decisions and they're reviewing them and then taking these decisions, and it's not coming down to councillors to get involved in that. And I would like to know, and if we haven't made representation about that, I would move that we do make representation about that there needs to be more time, unless there's something fundamentally wrong within our own organisation, that we can't accommodate the accountability of councillors and the decisions that are getting taken. Regarding the paper, and I know again down to timescale we've been got a list here, but what other options are on that have maybe been discarded? We don't get seen that, and I think for full openness we should have everything in front of us. Probably not really associated with the paper, but Joe mentioned that, and Michael mentioned that, is the hydrogen side of things. And I think the frustration with us in Escobride is that there are plans we hear of and we talk about, and a way forward for the town, but none of it seems to come to fruition. Hydrogen mentioned there. I see other authorities across Scotland going ahead with support from various agencies on hydrogen, but we've been told, you know, well, there's maybe no an issue that we can support it here, if I'm right in what I'm just hearing from the director. So I think there needs to be a wider debate about the future of Escobride, and it maybe not getting clouded in some of these papers, but maybe a paper coming forward at some point to actually say, where is Escobride going and what direction are we taking? Because since the closure of Rolls-Royce and other factors of job losses, we've really not taken anything forward. And I think that is a frustration. So I would welcome maybe some comment on that.
Okay. Michael, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it within the confines of the paper that's before committee today, but I will expand slightly and perhaps reiterate what I've already said. I think on the specific of timescales, I can absolutely assure all councillors at the meeting is that as officers, we continually raise that with UK and Scottish Government officials. Sometimes that message lands and sometimes it doesn't. But if you look at this paper, we got actual notification in May. We're now sitting at the tail end of June. So in the space of roughly 6 to 7 weeks, officers have put together a programme, and they were largely based on what we know and the work with the communities. So I'm not aware of any projects not making the grade this time, Councillor Watson, but I can ask officers to check and email that to you to give you the kind of full picture. but that is an incredibly quick pace to go at. What I would say, and you'll note from the paper, is that our views on timescales has landed in this particular instance, as Pauline has already presented at the start of the report. This is now a 5-year programme. We've got put money within one of the project lines to support capacity and capabilities within the group. So I would like to think that our constructive comments and timescales have landed in this particular instance, and I can assure you we'll continue to do so. In terms of the wider aspect in hydrogen, of course, happy to speak to members. I'd be interested to see what members' ambitions are, what policy directions they want to give us as officers, and happy to discuss that at a session that members want us to organise. But always just bear in mind that the council has a consequence. It presents the conditions for economic growth. In some instances, it's delivered by others. And I'm not discounting hydrogen, but simply because it's been mentioned, it has to be looked at carefully. And just because one or two authorities is taking it forward, which we are aware of and we understand some of the pitfalls, it doesn't mean that we go headlong into that. We just need to understand what members' policy direction and what to give us as officers, and of course we'll respond accordingly. Thanks, Chair.
Right. Pauline, you've got your hand up there. No, we can't hear you, Pauline. You're muted.
Apologies, members. Just to repeat, we haven't discarded any projects. As the directors explained, the time frame for this particular report was extremely quick. What we have been able to do is pick up projects that were not discarded before, but as I've explained, weren't ready for previous rounds of funding, including the ones in Halfway and Bothwell. We knew that the communities had ambitions. They weren't quite at the stage to spend the money before, so we've been able to help them out and make sure the projects get funded through this particular round. And as I've already said, the money set aside for capacity building and to develop projects is specifically there to enable places and towns that haven't had funding before to work up projects for over the next 4 years. And of course, we will have time to bring those to members, timelessly enable you to look at them, have bids, have a much more open process. But the time just hasn't been on our side. And just with regards to hydrogen and all things green, members of the Climate Change Committee may recall that through the budget there was funding made available for a Green Economy Officer. The funding actually sits within my colleague Alistair McKinnon's budget because he has a sustainability team under his remit. But that Green Economy Officer will sit in the Economic Development team, will sit against the officers who support the different sectors in South Lanarkshire. So we've got food and drink, tourism, engineering and so on, and they will look at the green economy in general, but also pick up on the hydrogen issue. And that post will be going out to advert very soon if it hasn't gone out already. In addition to that, members were kind enough to give Economic Development £3 million for projects and capacity in the budget, and a report on how we propose to spend that money will be coming to the next meeting of this committee in September with a number of new officers. And of course, some of those projects will cover Escobride, as they will all of the South Lanarkshire towns and places. Thanks, Chair.
Well, I've got Cathy McClyman, Josh Wilson and Margaret Walker. Cathy?
Thanks, Chair. No, it was just, I'm speaking on behalf of, I'll have to declare an interest in New Lanark. They're obviously a World Heritage Centre, the only one that we have in South Lanarkshire, but they're not mentioned in Appendix 1, they're obviously not on the LDP. I would see that this kind of money would be useful to them. I'm wondering if we can include them in the bid in the 2nd to the 5th year. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. There's no reason why New Lanark couldn't be considered for this funding, Chair. It was just for this first year of place-based investment funding. We had to look at a reasonable criteria for widening out the number of towns and places, and the LDP as a statutory definition was a good starting point. But the answer to that, Councillor McClymon's question, is yes, they can, and we'd be pleased to hear from them. Thanks.
Just have a word with them, Cathy, and tell them to put in a bid for the next funding.
Will do. I've already got it away.
Right. Josh Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Pauline, which I thought was pretty comprehensive. I'll start by welcoming the additional funding from the Scottish Government. I know that placemaking will play a huge part in regenerating our towns and villages. I think that through this funding, it proves that the Scottish Government recognise that. It's also welcome to see the additional funding for the New Cross Centre in Hamilton to support the ongoing fantastic work that's going on at the New Cross Shopping Centre to fund a new community hub in an area of the town which has struggled probably more than most. I would say, however, that I was slightly disappointed that we're not following the same bidding process this year as what we had done previously, because I thought that a key success of the Town Centre Fund was the community buy-in from it, and also the projects that we hadn't envisaged as an authority coming forward, and many of them are included within the report. I understand the timescales or the time constraints. This follows on a bit from what David Watson was saying. I understand the time constraints around this year, but I welcome the assurance at 5.10 that they'll be introduced in future years. But can you confirm that it's your intention to put all of the funding through a bidding process next year? And do we have to wait until the new financial year so that we can start the process, or considering we know what the funding is going to be next year, is it possible to start that process and advertising that process sooner? Thanks.
The answer is yes, Councillor Wilson. We're getting ready to go now. Because nobody likes being in the position of not being trying to please everybody and not pleasing anybody. So the answer, yeah, I agree with you. The bidding process has been good. It's worked well. The good news is because we've done it before, we've learned from what we've done, and I think we'll be able to make a good fist of it. But just as explained, because of the way and the timing this funding was arranged, just wasn't possible to do it for year one. However, for year one, we have hopefully been able to please some of the places and communities that didn't get funding through previous rounds. But I can give you the assurance, yes, we'll be taking bids moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Margaret Walker.
Thanks, Chair. Just appreciate, obviously, the timescales involved are tight, and particularly in relation to the first round of funding. But I think it is important as we go ahead that we get communities involved. I note that the VASLAN bid in terms of community renewal is to promote growth in the third sector. And part of their role is that they're working with areas just now that really, on a scale of 1 to 10, have some really serious problems in relation to, poverty, housing, all of the rest of it. And I think in terms of the next round of funding for the place-based investment and the community renewal and the levelling up, that hopefully, if VASLAN is successful in this bid, that we're actually going to be involving those communities in, for example, sorry to mention Rutherglen, Cambuslang, but Whitlawburn, Fernhill, Springhall, those areas where we have, got serious problems, and that we start involving these communities and make sure that they're, able to benefit from this, because they haven't had funding on this scale before. And I think it's important as we go forward that we start to equip them and support them to actually be able to access the levelling up funding that's coming down the line, and that they benefit from it. And at the moment, because of the pandemic, I mean, particularly in relation to stakeholders in Whitlawburn, Fernhill, it's been very difficult actually involving people. So we need to have a plan moving forward and how we do that, because they need to be equipped to be able to access the funding, because these are the areas that need it, and they need to be involved in the discussion, and they need to be involved in terms of what they need and want for their area. So I'd basically, just leave it at that, but I think we actually start planning for that now. Thank you.
I think, Margaret, to be fair, Pauline has said it's going to be starting now, but there also was the funding. Part of that funding was available for groups in any area to actually work up a bid for the funding. So I think you're right, yeah. We need to.
I know, but to be fair, Councillor Chair, they're not equipped to do it at the moment, and that's partly what's behind, I think, the VASLAN bid, because they need to be far more supported and equipped to do it than they are at the moment, because they're in an unfair position at the moment. They can't, compete with other areas. and we need to actually rectify that, and I'm assuming that's partly what, and also make sure that they can access the subsequent funding in relation to the place-based investment stuff as well as the Levelling Up Fund. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, point taken. Peter Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do agree with the original point that Councillor Watson made about the timescales and announcing these big budgets and the time we have to spend them. I do welcome, as Councillor Wilson said, I do welcome the extra money, but I think we really have to congratulate the officers who have taken those tasks on and come up with good, solid schemes, whether it's through participatory budgeting or all the other efforts they've made to get good projects on the go within those very, very tight timescales. So, you know, you look at Kenny Lean's team, the outside funders, Pauline Elliott's team, in fact, the whole of community and enterprise, as well as the rest of the council, we owe a great deal to those officers for the hard work that they've put in to produce those projects. So thanks very much, Chair.
I'm sure Michael will take that back to the officers. It'll be welcome to hear people praising them for a wee change rather than kicking the backsides, as sometimes it ends up happening. Joe, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So just briefly, it was one of my earlier questions. I think part of it was answered, but the second part I wasn't, and I didn't hear the answer come out in the discussion there. Can I just ask, on the point about the approval of the funds mentioned in 3.8, has there been political approval for the £3 million? I appreciate all the points that we made about the timescales. I appreciate the members' awareness session. Has there been political approval for putting that forward? Does the political approval come later when the UK government have told us what is acceptable and what is not? Because my understanding, I agree with what Pauline says, there have been numerous papers on this, and I appreciate the numerous papers that we've had on this, on the subject of town centre regeneration, not on the on community renewal funds. So I'm just wondering, is a paper coming forward where we can, even if the decision is taken in delegated authority, that can be explained to the council? Because it would seem to me there would either have to be political approval from yourself as chair, if we were in a recess, for example, or a special meeting of the committee would have to be convened. So I just want to understand, what is the approval process in relation to that community renewal fund?
Michael, you'd like to come in here?
Yeah. Just to confirm, the submission of the applications to the Community Renewal Fund was made by officers, so there wasn't a political sign-off. That practice is absolutely consistent with all external funding bids. If, for example, you look, probably relevant for this committee, is the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, members have seen them coming through. Members don't seek to approve them. They're submitted by officers. If they're successful, members will see them as adjustments within either revenue or capital reports to the executive committee. If members seek to change that process, that's within your gift to do that. There'd have to be a committee approval, I'm guessing, for that. But certainly, as an officer, and not to hark on about timescales, I think members' priority would really be to ensure that we maximise external funding opportunities, and Pauline's alluded to some of the additional capacity that's coming into this resource, which is incredibly welcomed to get us positioned better to take access to this funding going forward. So it may be something that members wish to reflect on as and when we hear the outcomes from this initial round of applications. But also bear in mind is that the Community Renewal Fund, as it morphs into the Shared Prosperity Fund and Levelling Up Fund, is there for a period of 4 to 5 years, as I understand. So it may be something that we can pick up during the members' awareness session, Chair, because there are significant funds coming along, and members may then wish to give a policy direction to officers. So again, apologies for the very long-winded answer, but maybe setting the scene for a post-summer recess discussion. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got no other hands up. I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is short cars, the grant application. And it's not Grant Ferguson that's getting any application in here. It is pages 73 to 76. And Pauline's going to take us through this report.
Thanks, Chair. As members are aware, the Council administers a conservation area renewal scheme for Straven with funding for Historic Environment Scotland. It has been a 5-year programme which ceases in March next year. It's administered by the Council but in partnership with community representatives and groups, and they're set out in section 3.4 of your report. Section 4 of your report explains that this report is asking you to approve a grant for 17 to 19 Green Street in Straven, which is a hairdresser and residential building. And if successful, the grant will cover a range of external repairs and refurbishment projects as set out in 4.2. As is usual, the applicant has had to obtain 3 quotes and the lowest is accepted. The lowest was 196,732. The Conservation Area Renewal Scheme gives an intervention rate of 80% as a grant award, with the balance being paid by the applicant. Chairman, if members approve this today, it will enable the work on the building to take place over the summer months, and these important improvements being made to this prominent building in Straven Town Centre. Consequently, Chairman, we'd like members to approve the recommendation in section 2 of your report for works to 17 to 19 Green Street and improve the physical regeneration of the historic town centre. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Any questions? Don't see any hands up. In that case, I'll move the report.
I'll second it.
We agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, the last 3 items are for noting, agenda item 11, 12 and 13. And I'm just going to move them. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask. So I'll move those 3 reports.
I'll second them.
Any questions, Jerry?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just I want to Shirley, if we take the total fleet, the fleet's no decreasing, it's actually going up. Could Shirley explain why? And I mean, if we take community, we take enterprise and the trust, which is the same, the 3 of them are the same department, they've went for 2016-17 for 517 to 663. I'm just wondering, what's the reason for that? I thought the idea was to try and get as many cars off the road as possible. Is this due to, we've got the pool cars now, instead of paying people to run their lease cars? Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Shirley, you?
Thanks, Chair. The reason the fleet's increased during the last year is in response to COVID. As you're aware, physical distancing has been a big mitigation factor, which has meant the number of people that we can get in a vehicle has reduced to 1, and in larger vehicles to 2. Therefore, we've had to hire in additional vehicles in the last year to enable us to deliver the services.
Okay, thanks, Shirley.
Chair, can I have a supplement to that then?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, because the way this report's been compiled, it doesn't tell you that. So basically, the fleet doesn't stand at 1632 because we've got so many vehicles on hire. That's completely different than actually having a fleet of 1632. What's the actual fleet that we own?
Well, we don't own fleet, we lease them. So this includes the assets that we've had to extend leases that would have been due for replacement. So these are all assets that are on our fleet asset management plan. So they're not, there's 2 different types of hire. There's casual hire, which you just bring in for short periods of time, like if there's a special project. But these are ones that we've extended their lease to enable us to keep them on beyond their original life. and in Appendix 1 we have got a paragraph that recognises the social distancing requirements. So as soon as these are lifted, we'll be able to look at reducing the fleet and continue to reduce as we review the services.
Thanks for that, Shirley. That's plenty
thanks.
here. Thanks.
Okay, I've got Lynn Nealon and David Watson. Lynn?
Thanks, Chair. My question is actually on the final item of contracts. I don't know if somebody wants to speak on the fleet issue before you bring me in, maybe.
No, I'll just take you there now.
Okay, thanks.
Item 13.
Just a couple of quick questions. We're given a contract of 440,000 for vending machine services. Are we now using vending machines in our buildings? I thought that they were all out of bounds due to COVID. That's the first question. And the second question is, please ignore my ignorance if this is like way off the mark, but am I reading this right? Meteo Group, we're giving them nearly £3.5 million. Is that for weather forecasting? Thanks, Chair.
Before somebody comes in, I think the weather forecasting is a joint one with several councils and we're the lead on it. So I don't think that's just from South Lanarkshire. The vending machines, I know they still have them in the schools, the high schools, so I don't know if that's it. If somebody could come in and just clarify it. Michael?
Yeah, I can deal with the weather forecast and Colin can keep me right if I've got this wrong, but I think you're right, Chair. We do that on behalf of a number of authorities across Scotland, and I think it's for a period of time as well, which is reflective of the actual values within that. So hopefully that addresses that particular point. I'll maybe ask Alistair to come in the vending machines if that's okay, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, certainly.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, the vending machines, we still do have vending machines in our council offices, given that they'll be opening up again, but the majority of vending machines are in schools, which are still operational.
Okay, Lynn, you happy with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. David Watson?
Thanks, Chair. Jumping back to the resource plan, page 84, 2.8, the future delivery of cultural and leisure provision. I'm not quite sure. It says one of the bullet point, services are delivered within available finances, and probably the question to that, are the finances available to deliver what we agreed at last week's full council for leisure and culture? I suppose that's a yes or no answer. And then the last bullet point, services are prioritised, which may mean withdrawing from some of the more peripheral activities or reducing the level of service in areas where there is over-provision or where participation is declining. What does that mean from a point of view of peripheral activity? And what does it mean for specific areas? Will councillors be notified of any reduction or withdrawal of services before anything like that happens? Because we took a decision last week about how we saw the shape of South Lanarkshire leisure and culture. Thanks, Chair.
Michael, I also see Alistair's hand up. I don't know if that's a legacy, same way Lynn Nealon, but Michael, would you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. Just on the first point, yes, it will have to be within the available budgets as with any resource.
Sorry, Michael, right, just on that. My point is, we took a decision last week. Is there enough finances available to deliver what we agreed last week as we saw the shape of South Lanarkshire leisure and culture?
We'll have to work within the available budgets, Councillor Watson, and we'll do that to the decision that the council made last week, which takes me to the second point. This resource plan was prepared in advance of the council meeting and to some extent reflecting on a possible outcome from the cross-party working group. So that has changed. So we need to reflect that in our quarterly update reports to committee and the decision that was made last week at the executive committee in terms of endorsement but also the full council, which followed, which agreed to the actions going forward, which includes no change to any assets or service delivery.
Okay. No further questions? We've already moved, and can we just agree the three reports?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Thanks very much. I have no other business, no urgent business. I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance today. Hope you can go out and enjoy the sun while it's here. Not too often we get too much of it. Okay. Stay safe. Okay. Take care.